the algorithm is occupying the human's planet, right?
Yeah.
So it's no more. It's in human space, right? Whether you like it or you don't like it, you have to live with the algorithm.
Some of the biggest opportunities are in health, education, mobility, and what's a massive underpin to all that? Finance. It's all up for grabs, but we need the right regulatory, the right legislative framework, right size regulation, always as history shown as a driver of innovation.
Like Chris, I'm interested in the humans. This is all about tools. This is all about them being our servants, not our masters, to quote the title of an extremely good book.
But I still remember reading an old history book about when ATMs came out and tellers went on strike. No, what are we going to be doing? Machines can't take over our job. Now we're closing bank branches and the world hasn't changed. Fintech is taking over that job. The world has to keep changing. Technology is going to drive that change.
Happy evening, everyone. Thanks for the panelists today evening. This is not a panel discussion. This is an open floor. We are going to have an open conversation. As we know, this is an Chatham House rule. In US, we say Las Vegas rule. What we speak remains in this room, right? Yeah. Right? Okay. So let me start with Lord Holmes. You all know Lord Holmes has been very vocal about AI, all the new disruptive technologies. He always have his own view how the technology has to be seen, used. I would like to start with Lord Holmes with a question of asking, what is your take on AI and what should the government do to implement AI and make it as a part of everyone's life?
Thank you very much, and a complete pleasure to be here. I think for all of you in this room, what are you looking for when you're wanting to invest in a business, in a company, in a region, in a community? What do you need? You want stability, as much certainty, safety, security. All that can only happen in this area of artificial intelligence if a country has the right legislative and the right regulatory framework for AI. I think the current approach in the UK of wait and see isn't the way forward. I don't believe wait and see has been a successful policy approach in any area, particularly of life. I think it's clear to me that we need to legislate, we need to lead in AI, pulling on the great good fortune of English common law, agile, dynamic, developmental, the financial ecosystem that we have here in the City of London and across the country, the good fortune of English as a language, and pulling on the heritage in many of the places that you've been to on your wonderful 3 days here. I was talking to Tim and we're thinking, everybody in this room has had a better 3 days than the 3 days we've had, to be honest. You've had a great time. You've done Parliament, been on that site for 1,000 years plus. You've been to Guildhall, 600 years old. You've come here to the exchange, one of the first exchanges in the world. We have the potential in this country, if we understand a principles-based approach, not least interoperability and an international perspective, to make such a success with all of you people in this room and beyond. of AI for public good, common good, wealth creation, economic growth, social growth, psychological growth, but we have a long way to go in achieving that. And I know we'll come on to that later in the panel.
Thank you, Lord Holmes. Let me take for the Lord Clement-Jones. Before AI, today we all speak about AI, but you have been the chair of APPG in 2016 to 2018. Those days, I don't think so everyone knows about AI. Those days we speak about machine learning and deep learning. That's what the topics, right? I don't know how many people were familiar about what AI can actually do. But you have been leading and you have been framing policies, recommending policies to the government. So what is your take, and what should the government do, and how should government act on the AI space?
Well, Lakshmi, it's very nice to be here as part of what I would call the crescendo. I hope everybody feels in crescendo mode this evening. I absolutely agree with Chris. I mean, Chris and I, we may be in different political parties, but we're both disappointed by the government's approach to this. Back in 2016, it was perfectly respectable to wait and see, A, what the opportunities were of AI, and B, what the risks were that needed mitigating. By the time we come round, and especially in the light of, late 2022, with ChatGPT, the sudden emergence of generative AI, it's absolutely clear that we need to put some guardrails around the risks, mitigate some of those risks in order to be able to take those opportunities. Because, one of our common themes, and I chaired the AI Select Committee, Chris was an extremely valued part of that, and the common theme that we had was that you cannot have really successful innovation unless you've got public trust for the technology that you're introducing. And so, we're all on the same page. I got so annoyed about the government's approach to this that I went into print earlier this year and set out a scheme whereby I thought we should be regulating. It partly is exactly as Chris says, it's partly the regulatory approach that the government should take. It doesn't need to be consistent totally with what the EU is doing, but it certainly needs to be interoperable with international standards. And the really important thing about AI, for my money, is that we are now gradually converging on those international standards. The OECD, for instance, is doing a great deal of work, as indeed they did with sovereign wealth funds historically, but they've done a great deal of work on trying to get standards agreed both by NIST, the American standard-setting body, CENELEC in the EU, ISO. There are a number of standard-setting bodies that are all happy to come together on this. So even though we're an outlier and we're not very keen on regulating at the moment under this government, I think at the end of the day, setting those international standards, being interoperable and having that kind of convergence is going to be absolutely crucial.
I love the book topic, Living with Algorithm, right? The humans occupied the animal planet. Now the algorithm is occupying the humans planet, right?
Yeah.
So it's no more it's in human space, right? Whether you like it or you don't like it, you have to live with the algorithm.
But the subtitle is Servant or Master, which is designed to be a little bit scary, so that you have to make your mind up as to whether you want regulation at this stage or not. And, whether or not you're just simply going to say all the risk is existential, or whether you say, no, we've got present risk, things like deep fakes, things like bias in the algorithms, and so on. Really important, I think, for people to make up their minds as to what they think is appropriate at this stage.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Oche, you run one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in Africa, and otherwise one of the largest sovereign wealth funds from the largest democratic country of Africa with the largest consumable country, right? The largest population, and Nigeria is also the fastest adopting country when it comes to technology. everybody want to capture the Nigerian market share in Africa. If they capture Nigerian market share, they're everywhere in Africa. And you also ran one of the largest sovereign wealth funds there. Sitting as a sovereign wealth fund in the past, taking a step back, assuming you have two perspectives now, one from a Nigerian perspective as a country and another perspective as a sovereign wealth fund perspective, what do you think the implementation? So one, we are talking about countries, the developed countries, well advanced countries in the world. Then other, we are talking about the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. So what's your perspective? Because everybody's fighting for the market share.
Correct.
So what is your thought on the AI, how this will penetrate to those masses?
Excellent. Well, first, thank you very much for the question, and thanks everyone for being here. But I think let's step back for a bit and try and remember when we started on this pathway of devices and digital revolution, okay, and where we are today. If you think back to 1998, when I started covering semiconductors, for example, not many people had mobile phones. You know, it never came to Africa until sometime mid-2000s. It came to Nigeria in 2004. People had analog phones. So it was a gradual penetration of technology. At the time, we started with 2G. There was 3G. Today, younger people in the room will never imagine a world where you didn't shop online. It didn't exist, right? We had to increase the bandwidth all the way to 3G, to 4G, now to LTE. All of those technology transitions happened at a time when most of the communication devices were very tight in terms of bandwidth. The processing power of the chips were very, very poor, and the adoption was gradual. Now, we're facing the world for the first time. We're having a transition in technology where everyone has a phone. Everyone has broadband. And this is why this is quite scary. People are saying, oh, AI suddenly had 100 million users in a short period of time. Of course it will. And in emerging markets, it's actually going to be far more interesting. And I think you're going to see more innovation coming out of emerging markets for the first time than you're going to see in terms of use of these devices. Why do I say that? Nigeria. Nigeria has 200 million people, of which 100 million are below the age of 19. These are digital natives. There are people that can't string together any sentence in English, but they can write codes, they can build things on chains. They understand this more intimately than they did 30 years ago. Same thing with India, right? I remember at the beginning when the outsourcing in India started. It was very gradual. But today, the adoption is going to be quite significant. So you're going to see the use cases in these markets in many ways, driven by the younger population who are digital natives who understand the use of AI. That brings up all kinds of issues. It brings up the issue of access, right? Yesterday, I found that 80% of Indians don't really have English as their first language. So this has to be not written with an English bias. This has to be written with a bias across all languages. The second aspect is cost, right? Mobile phones started out very expensive. Over time, it's become very cheap. Not everybody's going to pay $20 a month. You need to be able to give them things that actually are affordable. Thirdly, brings up the issue of ethical bias. We're not all on the same plane when it comes to how we view the world. So what is applicable to Saudi Arabia may not be applicable to Nigeria, may not be applicable to England. And this is happening at scale. This is not happening where it starts in America and then gradually gets somewhere. This is happening at one time, everywhere, all at once. So this is very important in the way we view it. So when you think about Nigeria, oh, by the way, one last thing, it has big implications on energy efficiency, right? Because in some of these countries, we haven't built hyperscale data centers yet, but there are people in Africa today who are clamoring for their data to be resident in their country. So this has all kinds of implications in terms of power supply, in terms of actually building data centers in those countries. And the final implication, of course, is what does AI do in terms of the ethical use of it? Is it going to replace people from their work? I actually believe it will not. I think like every technology innovation is going to change the nature of work, but it's only going to enhance the nature of work. We should not fear it. When you talk about regulation, people get scared. Certain aspects of it have to be regulated, of course. deep fakes have to, this is going to be an interesting election to observe because the world is going to be very, very different. There was a trial in 2016, but we have elections happening across half of the democratic world this year. This is going to play a very important role and has to be monitored. So there'll be implications. But watch out for what's going to happen in emerging markets in Africa and particularly in Nigeria. It's going to be an interesting world for us.
60% of the world, democratic world, is under election this year.
Correct.
And out of the 60%, more than 50% of the democratic world already implemented AI. Most of the political parties or AI is using from campaigning processes, identifying their voters, dissecting these constituencies. Its AI has been implemented. Whether how many people follow it or not, that has become a multi-billion-dollar business now because they're following the way how they are using the consumers, identifying the right target consumer. They even narrowed down in India how many people from which constituency will go for a vote or they won't go for a vote. Can you imagine they're finding out people who will go for a vote, they won't vote. And then they're segmenting them. They are not running a campaign, people who will not going for a vote. And this is proven. And there are cases filed in the Supreme Court why people haven't turned up for the election, for the voting, because they're trying to prove they have a technology play into that one. Let me come back to Holmes once again. So, Lord Holmes, you mentioned in the first statement, technology for the good, technology for the right, and Oche also mentioned about being an ethical AI, responsible AI. We are moving from a responsible investment, sustainable investment, to a sustainable AI and responsible AI now. I want to ask you, the biggest challenge or biggest fear for adoption is people will lose job, right? For it's not if you don't adopt or if you adopt, there's a two dilemma. One, if I adopt, will I have to work too much hard or I have to implement too many issues? If I don't adopt, then I will have another issue. So, you both, Lord Holmes and Lord Clement-Jones, both of them are sitting on the government perspective. One thing you never want to happen, people losing job. Unemployment is a bigger issue because it will have a social impact than just on people losing the job. So how do you protect the same? Adoption has to happen, implementation has to happen. Same time, people shouldn't lose job. So being in that position, please would like to listen to your views.
Yeah, and a lot in your question then. I'm very much of the same opinion that I don't think it is going to leave less jobs ultimately than what we have. But it's like all great periods of change that you need to fundamentally understand and then manage the transition. That's where things generally go wrong because it's not understood, the change, the transition's not managed. If you imagine Tim and I were lawyers, when we started out, some of the things that you'll know in this room that you'd have to do as a lawyer, pagination. I remember my first day I was told about pagination. I thought, wow, what does this word mean? One. Ooh, number two. Good. Three. Yeah, it's a good document. Paying someone who's been to law school to do that is utterly ridiculous. It can absolutely enhance not just labour, but the human experience. But that is the possibility. It's not the inevitability. If we stuff it up and there is mass job losses, that's a human failure, not a technology failure. There's absolutely no reason why we can't make a success of this. And the best way to make a success of it is to understand the ethics which underpin it. Tim was saying that the committee that he chaired that I was on, we also had a bishop on it, which is a very good thing. It's good to have a religious leader in the mix to give a different perspective. Have an ethical base, then be principles based, outcomes focused, inputs understood and where necessary paid for. And it's why I brought my AI regulation bill earlier this Parliament to try and get this to be the way that in the UK we think about legislating for the possibilities of AI, because there's no question that the risks are immense. And it's part of the problem with the Bletchley Summit last year, really. You'll be aware of the safety summit that was done last November. very positive, very successful of itself. But why would you have a summit and then do nothing subsequent to it? Why would you have a summit on safety but then not seek to address all of the areas of AI that are already impacting people's lives right now, oftentimes without them even knowing it? And work is a good example. Recruitment, somebody may find themselves bumped out of a shortlisting process without even knowing that AI was in that process. They wouldn't have even known it right now. And even if they did come to know it, there's nowhere to go for right of redress for that. So understanding the framework that we need of an AI authority to horizontally look across all of our regulators, to have a consistency, a clarity, a coherence of approach, to identify where the gaps are, both in regulators and the legislation, and to, through that, through the principles and an ethical approach, give us the best chance to make a success of this. Because again, to underscore that point, this is in our human hands, and the best way we can go about it is to understand AI and these technologies as tools. Incredibly powerful, of course, but tools in our human hands, human-led, human in the loop, human over the loop. That's the best way that we can make a success of this.
Wow. Thank you. So I want to share some number. Outside US or outside China, UK is the second largest company on AI innovation now. If you look at US, there are 500,000 companies, 500,000 plus companies as registered within the last 2 years claiming AI as a base. UK has got more than 80,000 companies registered saying they're using AI as an innovation. The challenge is if there can be one simple regulation can trigger to shut down everything. A simple regulation. And this has happened in the past. We have seen it in every industry. I want to go back to Lord Clement-Jones here. You have been a part of science. I divide science and technology always separately. The people in tech are a different way of thinking, different way of doing. Science is a completely different way of thinking and doing, completely. So, and you have been on both sides, being a part of the science as well as part of the technology. Sometimes I always think tech people doesn't have any logic. That's how I look at it. But so the science, so being on the both sides, on the science and the technology, do you believe or do you have a stand that AI can play a critical role or a great role in changing the way how the science is perceived or currently innovated, anything in this domain of science? Because if that can happen, you are in a compulsion to implement AI. You don't have a choice, right? So what is your take on it?
I think, funny enough, I think it could be the other way, because when you look at R&D, we're very used to spin-outs from life sciences and so on, and we're not quite so used, and we've obviously got better at it. We've got better at the spin-outs from technology and AI innovations and so on over a period of time. But the one thing that research has always had in science, particularly in the health sciences, is some sort of fundamental ethical base for it. So I think the two are getting more intertwined over a period of time. But I think that I just want to pick up something that Chris very wisely said, was the point about recruitment and employment and AI in the workplace, because it's very easy to think, well, this is all science, this is technology, basically it's all going to happen, people are going to innovate, I can't be held responsible for what happens in society. But we've been here before. I mean, I'm very taken by that picture of Fifth Avenue in 1900, which has all horses horses and carriages, and then in 1913 it's all motor cars, it's all automobiles. So we have been here before, and we need time. That's what we need. We need a proper managing, as Chris says, of that process in terms of adapting innovation. And therefore what that means is, and I think this is particularly important for those who invest in new technology or invest in companies that are adopting new technology, is the accountability, if you like, of the top management. You can't delegate this stuff. And as you said, Uche, I mean, it's really important that you understand whether this technology is augmenting what you're doing or it's substituting. And you have to be very conscious in terms of how you do it. I mean, you know, Chris and I are both lawyers, and probably our skills have been substituted years ago by AI now. You know, you could probably put into the machine what we know, and out comes a far better answer. But and lawyers, you know, now a paralegal can actually, with a decent bit of AI kit, can actually come up with answers that a very experienced lawyer, formerly 10 years ago, you'd have had to ask them for. So, you know, we are upskilling people to a considerable degree, but this means that we have to be very conscious of what we're doing. So, you know, are we basically substituting, or are we making those professional lives better by giving them better tools? We've just got to be conscious of what we do. Now, and I haven't really answered your science and technology question, but I think more and more the two are intertwined in terms of how we approach things.
You know, my understanding is people say, hey, AI is going to change the way how humans think, right? The way it's challenging the human thinking. So I did some fun. Before I started this one today evening, I thrown some questions to AI, asking in the chat bot. I put the profile of Lord Holmes and I asked him, I'm going to interview him. Give me 3 questions that I should ask Lord Holmes, right? I did it, right? And that I did the same for Clement-Jones. So I wanted to say what it asked. It told me you should ask him how AI is going to be used in his sports field, because he's a Paralympic person, he should be able to answer you better. I asked him, give me the reasoning. Why should I ask? Also, give me the reasoning. Why should I ask him that question? Second thing is, it also told me you should ask him how people, because he's one of the most successful person who talks about supporting about technologies and everything, controversials around AI. That's the second question thrown about Lord Holmes. So when Clement-Jones, I asked, it told me, oh, his past career shows he's an attorney. How many attorneys will lose the job? How attorneys will start using this AI? So it never gave me any positive way. I thought, oh, if I go with these questions, if I go with these questions, right, I don't want to get fired. I put Oche, I tried with the Oche also, right? So it gave me different questions, right? It asked me to ask technical questions to him because he's a board member of an AI company. So you should ask him technical, how the codes will go, how will there be a world without codes? That's a question it gave me to ask him, right? So yeah, let me go to Oche, right? Yeah, I thought I'll make my job easy. Come with the questionnaire, right? Come with the questionnaire, just like that. Okay, Oche, tell me about, see, there's a lot of capital flowing into this market. I don't know whether it's a bubble or whether it's a reality. In the last 2 years, it has seen more than couple of $100 billion worth of capital has been actually deployed. A few companies has raised in tons of billions of dollars. Some of them are talking. And the valuations of some of the companies like NVIDIA and all other companies, you know, NVIDIA has run on one product of GPU. Yes. You know, they have become $1 trillion company. 2.5 trillion. Yeah, if somebody can come and replace overnight, people may be innovating, right? It's not a door shut. Everybody's trying today. People are talking about coming with a memory. They don't want to use the GPUs. Somebody is talking about, so people are talking about various things it will replace. So what is your opinion of this capital flowing in? How long this will grow? And is it a bubble? Because if there is a bubble, you know, what happened in 2000 year, the tech boom and the burst, and it may collapse the whole industry, right? So there's a risk on the capital markets. Correct. And we're sitting and talking from the London Stock Exchange, sure, one of the oldest stock markets, right? So what is your thought process? Will it continue, or is there a risk, or what should the government do to protect it?
Sure. All right. I'm glad you picked NVIDIA, because I started covering NVIDIA in 2001. And somebody showed me a report I published in 2012 where I said, buy NVIDIA with a price target of $15.50. And now it's $1,250 per share. And I think, first of all, is it a bubble? There's elements of bubble building. NVIDIA I started covering NVIDIA at less than $10 billion market cap. Now it's $2.7 trillion. And the entire stock market of Germany is $2.5 trillion.
Have you ever regretted you never bought a lot of stocks?
Well, there was like regulations that I couldn't buy, right? There was regulations that I couldn't buy.
There's good regulation and bad.
Bad regulation. This was a bad regulation. But the point being is this. But having said that, right, so speaking of regulation, can I detour for a minute?
Yeah, please.
You can't talk about AI regulation without regulation of big 5 tech companies in the US today. There is no day and somebody in the world is not using something from Microsoft, from Apple, from Amazon, from Facebook, and from, Google. Correct. These 5 companies at some point are going to become more powerful than countries, more powerful than regions. And the fact that Facebook can shut up the United States of America president is something the world needs to take notice of. At some point, something needs to be done. Chatham House rules, of course, please. Nobody's to tell NVIDIA what I just said before they shut off from giving us chips. But the harsh reality is this. We need to talk about that for a minute. And this is why countries are carving out territories for themselves now. Okay? This is why Europe says we're going to back Mistral. This is why China is trying to create something around Baidu. And this is why I think I'm serving on the board of QX Lab AI, because I think the emerging markets in this big discussion we're having now needs to have a seat at the table. We cannot have the world defined by the standards by 1 or 2 companies today, which, quite frankly, these 5 companies turn off their switches, the whole world goes dark. Now, that's a whole different conversation we need to address at some point. If there's any risk to the world today, it's the risk of dependence on these 5 companies, and they all come from one country with its views, which I think could create all kinds of other issues. Park that for a minute. Let's talk about valuations and bubbles. Look, over time, ultimately, there is no time when a company does not hit its peak and start to deflate. It's going to happen. There was a time Cisco was the biggest company in the world. Is anybody talking about Cisco today? It's a time ExxonMobil was the biggest company in the world. And now we're talking in renewable energy. So it's a time when, you can name any company. Elephants can't jump. At a certain point, the world will start to dissipate and value starts, or people get complacent, or whatever the reason is. But I just think for the case of artificial intelligence, not yet. Because there are so many fragments to this that we're yet to discover what it can do. We're going to see this transform advertising, right? And we're going to see this change certain businesses. You pay a lot of money for a model to advertise for you, but with text to image, you create your own model. You don't pay him anything or hire anything. It's going to change healthcare in ways. It's going to change biotech. It's going to change research in healthcare in many ways. So I think the value is going to go from a certain point. Today, all the value right now is that people are not sure what to do. So they're all putting money in NVIDIA, right? Because in a war that you're not sure we want to pick sides, you buy the guy that supplies the ammunition, right? And the moment NVIDIA is the one supplying the ammunition. But there's a lot of that also moving into the foundational level companies. I haven't seen what Elon Musk is going to do, but it's Elon Musk. His company is already worth $24 billion. He hasn't even done anything, right? So there's an element of bubble in some of these things. However, I think that it's going to settle at a point. There's a point you get to the money runs out. But then the value now starts to seep into the application level. What are you doing in healthcare? What are you doing in finance? What are you doing in advertising? What are you doing in other areas? And I think this is where certain companies will start to capture this value. What I have seen in technology over time, every technology niche, and AI is going to have several niches. always has room for number one, number two, and maybe number three, but that's it. So there'll be consolidation. There are many companies doing so many things with AI in certain spaces. Over time, it's going to come down to one or two companies. And this is how it's going to be. But the reason why I think the AI space is going to shift is right now, you're going to see the value that accrued to the like of NVIDIA over time start to seep into other aspects. Secondly, NVIDIA started out as a graphics chip company. And I still remember the day they launched CUDA, which is the basic software that drives everything today that has become. They launched it in 2008. Nobody cared for it. And they sat on it. And then initially, cryptocurrency wanted to use it. There was a big bubble in NVIDIA share price with crypto. That collapsed. Stock dropped 50% from the peak. And today, there's this AI bubble that's driving NVIDIA. Now, I think there's a point we get to, it starts to seep into other places. AMD is in the wings. Intel, people have written off Intel, and I think they are right to do so. But I don't think it's something that we should do for a very long time. The industry is coming together now to write a software system equivalent to CUDA. It takes time. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. My bet is probably going to take 5 years before you see another industry standard. It took a long time before Android came up and became a standard. So that will happen. The moment the industry comes together, create a new software standard, you're going to see that value shift. My view, however, is that it now starts going into application level. And today, it's exciting. We don't know really what AI can do in some areas, but I'm very hopeful that this is going to transform many things. It's going to transform media. It's going to transform the legal practice. It's going to transform education. It's going to transform healthcare. I'll give you an example of healthcare. And this is where I think the value is going to be very helpful. Emerging markets, you asked me about Nigeria. Nigeria has, I don't know, for a country of 200 million people, I think right now we have less than 100,000 doctors. Many of them are already in the United States and the NHS, and living. In some countries, in some parts of the country, where you can't have a doctor, you can't post a doctor there because they can't afford to pay. Why can't we have an AI general practitioner sitting with a trained nurse? That's going to be transformational. So when I think about what this can do, I actually see the opportunities. And now you're going to see value shift to those kind of applications. You're going to see this cut down the process of research for drug discovery. Because anything that requires big memory, that requires a lot of letters, this is what artificial intelligence is going to do very well at. That's where you're going to see value start to seep. So my sense is this. If you've missed the NVIDIA rally, like I have, look at the application layer. Because that's where I think things are going to get very exciting. Then, one last thing, sir. Look at what's going to happen to regional markets. People have this bias against OpenAI now. It's an American standard. We cannot have another standard at the end of the day. So you're going to see certain countries, India. You're going to see certain countries in Africa ask for data residency. You're going to see China. Everybody is going to pull their own. Look for country-level plays as well. This is where I think the value is going to shift to.
Thank you, Ochi. Thank you. So let's wrap up this session with the closing remarks from everyone individually. Lord Holmes, would like to hear your closing remarks, your thoughts.
Thank you. Fundamentally, we have such an opportunity. As you just heard, some of the biggest opportunities are in health, education, mobility, and what's a massive underpin to all that? Finance. It's all up for grabs, but we need the right regulatory, the right legislative framework, right-sized regulation, always as history's shown as a driver of innovation, a driver of inward investment. We all know bad regulation, but that doesn't mean regulation is bad. That's just bad regulation. Such an opportunity to have human-led, enabled, unleashed potential to do things that even 5 years ago we couldn't achieve. And fundamentally, everybody in this room has such a positive role to play because finance is such a key to this, and AI's impact on finance and how you interact as financiers with AI. You know, for financial institutions, just one example, you know, to understand how to abstract away from the stack and not be bound by that difficulty of a lumbering stack and wondering if you're still going to be able to find a Fortran 77 coder to be able to help to keep the sticky plasters on it. Such extraordinary opportunities. I really think that if we look at the ledger for some of the big stateside LLMs, for example, just by way of example, just in the Chatham House rules, Chatham House and Vegas rules put together. You know what I'm saying, folks? And Chatham House, Vegas, all in the circle of trust. If you look at the ledger for, say, ChatGPT, everybody understandably, because of the PR and the marketing, focuses on the outputs. This is extraordinary, it's game-changing, all that stuff. That's all true, but for all of us, when you're considering a more long-term view and an investor view, consider the other side of the ledger, which gets far less coverage. Consider what finance has gone into that model. Consider what energy has gone into that model. Consider what data, oftentimes unpaid, unrespected, unremunerated data, has gone into those models. Consider all those factors, and then when you put both sides of the ledger together, it becomes a far more interesting view, I think. And that's why I think, as you said quite correctly, we are going to see some more interesting developments with smaller models, with far better data sets, with a lot more work done on the data before it's just chucked into the model. Definitely and positively some far more regional plays. And I think if you see in Europe how the development rather amusingly has gone on that, where there's been a sense of, caricaturing only slightly, we've got to do something about those American monopolies. They're terrible. Mistral were comme ça. Everyone hates a monopoly till they have one of their own. And that's why ultimately we can make a success of this if we go to what it is to be human. We understand philosophy, ethics, politics, economics, social theory, psychology, behavioural economics. We know everything that we need to make a success of this. It's down to us to make sure that we do.
I'm going to feed ChatGPT some information that you can ask questions about technical questions to Lord Holmes. So, because it doesn't have the data points, right? You're talking about the data points, about the codes and ledgers and everything. So somebody has to put in that they can ask those questions also. So next time somebody asks you questions when they go for ChatGPT, that will throw that you have that knowledge.
Interesting.
Yeah, because ChatGPT is what you give in is what you get out. That's what it is.
And exactly, if you consider how much of the world is unconsidered in so many of these models, because it's only swept what's there on a very Western biased and Western-centric web, then you have to consider also. And final point before I will absolutely shut up. When you said that one of the things that GPT told you, it said I was one of the most successful people on something. Could there be a clear example of hallucination?
Very good.
I have seen people writing prompts. They write the prompts. Can you please tell me? They pleading to the system, the prompt. Can you please tell me, right? Can you please translate? And I have seen people addressing that one, sir, madam. I have seen, guys. The biggest business by engineering colleges, and I'm sorry to say that it's a Chatham rule here. India has got too many in engineering colleges. Too many. The number of schools is less than the engineering colleges. That much of engineering colleges. Believe me, in another 2 years, some engineering college will launch a program called Engineering in Prompt Engineering. Right? They will give a degree called Bachelor of Prompt Engineers. And you will get them. In 3 to 4 years. And these guys will be trained to just ask questions. At least they will not put please, request me. Those things will not happen. Sorry, okay. Clement-Jones, would like to have your closing notes, sir.
Well, I think it always pays to be polite when you're addressing an AI. That's all I can say. I'm always very polite. Otherwise, you get all sorts of wrong answers. But I do recommend to this group of people a book by Robert Harris called The Fear Index. I don't know if anybody's read it, but it was all about a fund manager based in Switzerland, and it's actually the AI that takes over ultimately, in a way that is seamless. And so effectively it dispossesses the guy who's meant to run this and own this fund manager completely. And so he has no access to the funds, no access to the clients. The AI makes sure of that. If anybody wants a sleepless night, that's exactly the book to read. And that was written, 7 years ago, something like that. But I find using narratives are quite useful in a way that tells you what might happen and what you need to avoid. And I'm also a great fan of William Gibson. And he wrote Neuromancer and the books on which all the Keanu Reeves Matrix movies were based on. And it's all about this kind of cloud AI existence that people have to belong to, effectively. You plug in, you either belong to one AI or another. And what worries me is, and I entirely take Uchi's point, that there are going to be sectoral applications, and they're going to be specialized. There will be 2 or 3 players in each. It won't be as significant, however, as the fact that you may have 2 or 3 players for the big, large language models that dominate your life. And it may be that, basically the relationship between, say, Microsoft and OpenAI, that'll consolidate. The relationship between some of the others like Anthropic and Amazon and so on will consolidate, and you may find yourself with only a sort of Coke and Pepsi choice in life. And we've already got Apple and Android, and not much else apart from that in terms of operating systems. So what we have, and Chris and I have been recently working on a competition bill, the Digital Markets Bill, and the EU has put into place the Digital Markets Act. The States is very proactive in this area as well, which is a good thing because we do have to preserve competition in this space. And I don't want to see a situation where I have, right from birth almost, have to decide which AI I adopt for my purposes. I want to have a plurality. I want that. So, like Chris, I'm interested in the humans. This is all about tools. This is all about them being our servants, not our masters, to quote the title of an extremely good book. But, that's what I want to see because I want to see this opportunity put in place. I already use AI to great effect. I find some of the systems out there are fantastically useful. For instance, you come out with a select committee report from the House of Lords. It's 100 pages long. You want a digest of it. Well, Claude can do it if you're polite to it. And it's a very useful tool. And then Chris and I can make a speech about it in the House of Lords,
How quickly does it write the book?
No, as long as...
Not yet. Second edition. That's what
Thank you, Clement-Jones.
I just wanted to, if I may, and just interrupt you, gentlemen. It's such a privilege and delight to be with you all this evening. And I just wanted to ask all of the panel, especially Lord Holmes, ethics-driven leader in the future of AI. And we are all looking forward to the next 500 years when the human and machine will be hybrid, and we will have merged pretty much with chips, etc., etc. And we're all looking forward for the factory human slaves, let's say, of the China PRC to migrate to the new ultra-modern 21st century jobs. That's definitely, there is no question. But I just wanted to, with your new act in the Parliament, how
I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Just
we
wanted to
don't
ask
have
you,
time-
Lord Hall.
We don't really have
Lord,
time for questions
I
right now.
just wanted to ask him safety of the young generations who are unfortunately committing suicide because the meta problems are so exponentially rising, and we have a young generations who unfortunately not all of
Ma'am,
them,
can you
but
please stop
some of them
talking?
are just
Ma'am,
kind of
ma'am,
adverse to it.
there's no
Thank
question, there's
you.
no Q&A.
Yes,
Sorry,
this is
sorry.
just for Lord.
Sorry, okay, we understand.
Ma'am,
Sorry.
please,
Thank you.
out of respect.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, Oche, let me take your closing remarks. And before, and you have to make sure that you speak something what Clement-Jones and as well as Lord Holmes, right?
No, I will do.
Yeah.
Because I like back to the whole Master of Seven thing, which I think is really a statement that is how people are perceiving this. There are people who are extremely scared machines will take over the world. Tesla driverless cars is a scary version for a lot of people. But quite frankly, I think, number one, we shouldn't be afraid of machines. They all have a switch, and you can turn them off. So I wouldn't worry too much about machines taking over the world. And I think, at the same time, I'm very, very supportive of regulation in some ways. The problem is we don't really know what we're regulating just yet. But we also know where it's done damage. We know it's done damage to young people who are committing suicide. We need to protect young people. I'm not sure how we got to this point where 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 6-year-olds have access to these devices and things that are not filtered. Yeah. So that is one area where regulation needs to play a very strong role. I also think that we should create a world today where, and we're going to be talking about, I have to plug my company, but we're going to be talking about trying to create something that people who don't speak English can also be part of this modern world. And I think this is where the biases need to be addressed. And I'm going to close with one challenge to the both of you who are part of the United Kingdom, policy setting rules. When I see NVIDIA, and people don't realize this, that without ARM Holdings sitting at the heart of NVIDIA, a company that was developed through a university in the UK, without it, there'll be no NVIDIA, there'll be no, but then you don't really capture the value in this country. Yeah. I think if you need to do something, you should be addressing that as well. You can't have your companies all schlepping off to America.
We have a pipeline problem, big time. Yeah.
So addressing that for me is very, very crucial and very important for what I believe is going to be a balanced world in terms of where technology is going. But I'm excited about the future. I'm actually quite happy to be living in this generation. I went from a world where I didn't have a mobile phone to a world now where we're talking about artificial intelligence, and it's real. And I think it's only going to transform the world. We were afraid. I like your analogy about Fifth Avenue. But I still remember reading an old history book about when ATMs came out, and tellers went on strike. No, what are we going to be doing? Machines can't take over our job. Now we're closing bank branches, and the world hasn't changed. Fintech is taking over that job. The world has to keep changing. Technology is going to drive that change, and I hope that we all catch the next wave, and I think this is going to be an exciting one for the world.